Hola familia, it's Yesi here.
Hey, this is Edith.
And today we have a full house in my house. We ate some brunch, we're drinking some orange juice.
With maybe something else in it. I don't know.
But yeah, we have our men here and they are currently just watching football in silence.
We pretty much made them to watch it in silence, but
yeah. Anyways, Edith, how are you?
I'm doing really good. It's been a really good week. I have a very busy weekend. One of my friends is getting married this weekend.
Yay.
And then we have a 15 for the family. I feel like my family always has something going on.
They do. Yeah, y'all do.
We really do.
Perks of having a big family, though.
That is true. But then sometimes you like overbook or double book. Like today, I have my friend's wedding and then I have to go to my family's 15.
And you had to do this too.
And then I had to do this. But I love it. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like it's all about time management. And we're doing good. We already had breakfast. We had some drinks. We're recording.
Speaking of time management, Edith in our friend group is just like notorious for like being late all the time.
That is true.
And this morning, last night, Kurt and I fell asleep late, and he was like, "We have to wake up early, right?" And I was like, "Nah, don't worry about it. The Latas are always like late." And they were on time today.
We were actually 20 minutes early.
And we were like scrambling to just get everything ready for them to like start cooking. And so we just started eating and it's like 12:19 right now, but we just finished eating like 20 minutes ago?
Probably. But I told her, I was like, I want to change my title. I don't want to be known as the one that is always late. But I guess I need to start being late again.
Yeah, now you're just gonna surprise us every time. We're gonna have to be ready for you.
That is true. But what about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I took a social media break. I think it was just like my body just kind of like responding to like my mental health and stuff, and just taking a break from it, because I think whenever I start to get too much into social media, I think I start comparing my life to other people's and like where they are in their life and where I am in my life, and like a lot of them are like traveling a lot, and then I get FOMO for that, and then I get sad about it and I get Llorona about it. But yeah, I actually got my tarot cards read on Monday.
How was that?
It was really nice. My focus was kind of talking more about like any money blocks that I might have, and she was like, girl, you don't have any money blocks. You just need to embrace yourself, and once you embrace yourself and do what you love, the money will start flowing. And so I'm like, okay.
I feel
so
like
I just
that's
need to accept me for me.
I feel like that's a first gen issue, right? Like I feel like sometimes we think that we're not big enough, or that we're not able to make it up there.
Well, there's also like a lot of imposter syndrome with being first gen. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's a topic that we can talk about further into this.
That is true. We can. I mean, I feel like it would be a really good topic that a lot of people can relate with. I mean, I can relate with it too. I think that not like, when it comes to money talking and everything, and as a first gen can be really, really hard, that it would take us a whole other episode to talk about.
Oh yeah,
but
we can't dive into that right now.
That is true. We have a whole other topic for today. Our topic for today that we're going to be talking about is difficult conversations to have with parents.
Ooh,
I got
spooky season.
But I feel like that question is it's already like, I don't know. Like, there's so many that.
Yeah, it's like a really loaded topic. I think we cover a lot of different topics that we want to cover individually, but I think today's is just kind of focusing on how do we talk to our parents about this, and maybe like how they talk to us about this, whether they do or they don't, and all that jazz.
That is true. And I feel like as just a person in general, like that's what we were talking about this morning, about parenting and all of that. I feel like it's hard to have some conversations with parents, especially in my case, very traditional parents who have their sets of like, my kids are gonna be like this, like that, like that.
Like, yeah, las expectativas que nos ponen.
Exactly.
And wanting to like honor those of like, this is the person that I raised you to be. Right? And there's like this fine line of like the person they raised us to be, but also like our own person, like our own selves, because as much as they raised us and they instilled their ideas and beliefs in us, like we also are able to create our own ideas and beliefs. And I think I know that I've had very difficult conversations with my mom and my dad about those, but we can dive into that in a minute.
Definitely. So what we did this week was to reach out to our followers and our familia.
Shout out.
And we are very grateful that you guys are sharing your experiences, because this is the whole point of this podcast, is to connect with you guys and also talk about that connection that we have with you guys as well. So we just asked everyone, and we were like, what were or are some difficulty conversations that you have with parents or that you had? Because maybe sometimes now as a grown-up or as an adult, maybe you don't have those conversations anymore because you're like, I'm a parent of my own.
Yeah, and then it's your turn to have those conversations with your children eventually.
Yeah. So one of the first responses that we had was telling my parents that I was pregnant without being married.
Ooh.
I was like, ooh, that's a good one. That was a really good one. Porque en la familia hispana, like, being pregnant out of marriage is like, ay Dios mío.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's admitting to several different things, I think. Like, it's admitting to having sex, just in general. It's admitting to, like, saying, like, I didn't follow their expectations of me.
And I don't know about you, but like myself, I grew up Catholic, so a lot of time that also brings up religion. Like, you know, the religion believes of having sex out of marriage and like having a child out of marriage too without being married. That's like a big thing for Hispanics too. Yeah. And like the Latino community in general. And it's just kind of like that thing of like, ¿qué? ¿Estás embarazada? Like, ¿y no estás casada? It's those kind of things of... And I personally cannot relate with that, but I have seen that a lot in my family and just in general with family and friends. I feel like, you know, a lot of times that also comes a lot with like dating too.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, but let's like sit on sex for a minute. I like how we just came in hard.
We were like, whew.
It's sex. Okay.
I feel like this response has so much to...
There's a lot of layers to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so to have conversations within sex in general, like, not just saying, like, Mom, Dad, I had sex. I just had sex.
I used to laugh at Yesi because when we were talking about this topic, she was like, ooh, can we have a conversation on sex? And I was like, can you just say sex in a normal tone of voice? So that
See, you reminded me, now I'm gonna do it.
Oh my god.
Anyways.
You know,
so just like within sex, like the conversation of like the first time that I had sex, like with my mom, was like, I was just not gonna tell my mom, because growing up, mommy wanted me to be like very like, you have to like the first thing that pops into my head is like, you have to sit with your legs closed.
Oh man. Oh, what the I'm over here with like, yeah.
Right, so like you have to be very proper, no te puedes llevar con los hombres, you can't joke around with them, like you have to like carry yourself in a respectful manner. And me being the rebellious soul that I am, I was like, but why? Like, they get to do all that shit, like why can't I?
Exactly.
And so I've always had that that mindset. So whenever, like growing up, anything that I did, I wouldn't tell my mom. I would, you know, I come off as just like very good, but mommy knows what she has, and she knows that I'm pretty cabrona, so it is what it is. But anyways, I remember I lost my virginity at age 19 in college. Shout out Fabian.
What?
he's married already. It's fine.
Well, moving on.
Maybe we can cut that piece out. Sorry. Anyways. Yeah. So I went home like that summer between 2013, and I was doing my mom's hair or makeup or something. Like we were just bonding and stuff, and and she like asked me, like she wasn't looking at me. I think I was doing her hair because I was behind her, and she's like, "Have you lost your virginity yet?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "You're lying to me," because she's really good at picking up lies. And I was like, okay,
which
fine.
mother isn't, right?
Yeah. And I was like, okay, fine, yes, I have. And so she like asked me, she's like, "It was this guy, right?" And I was like, yeah. And then she's like, "And that's all you've done?" And I was like, yeah, for sure. And so it was a very emotional conversation that I had with my mom, where she like cried, and she was like, "I just always wanted you to wait until marriage." And so it was really hard for me to have that conversation, because I feel like I definitely felt like this part of me kind of like failed her to some extent. But then like that, you only get one man for the rest of your life.
And that's the thing about sex
At such a young age.
Yeah, I feel like that's the thing with sex and like very traditional parents, or just parents in general who grew up very different than we were. Like, especially in my case, like my mom she grew up in a rancho. Like she grew up in a very small town, which is very like traditional, very very kind of like of high expectations of like, you're gonna be married before you have kids kind of thing. And I feel like our parents thought that we were gonna do the same thing, like that we were gonna get married and then have kids. But if you really look at it now, there's so many Latinos and Latinas out there who are like, no, like, I'm gonna have my family first and then I'm gonna get married, or maybe not, like, and it's okay. And I feel like that's a really hard conversation to have with parents, because sometimes it's like you telling them, I'm not gonna do it your way, I'm gonna do it my way. Es porque es algo diferente, like yo no pienso así como tú, or yo no pienso así, and it's okay. And I feel like even now there's still some Latinos out there who do want to do the whole traditional stuff, which is great.
Yeah, like, it's great for you guys,
and it's great. And I feel like it gives us those kind of like two different views of like sex being a very difficult conversation to have. Yeah, and I think like these difficult conversations kind of come into place when like we're not agreeing on something. And being first generation and growing up, we're so exposed not only to our traditions and our ideas and beliefs coming from our family, but also in developing our own as we're going through like college, as we're learning stuff, so like within life in general. So it's a very different mix of like wanting to stay within these boundaries that your parents create, but then also like wanting to get out of that a little bit and exploring some more. And I feel like one thing that merges a lot with this, I know that we're talking about sex, it's all about like the traditions, like it's like that religion part of it. It's based off of that religion part of like, oh yeah, you're not gonna get married, you're not gonna have kids before you get married, like, because it's a sin, or you're not gonna sleep, like be under the same roof or live with someone without being married. It all comes to it. And a lot of times also merges to the idea of like, oh, you have a kid, okay, now you have to get married.
Like a lot of pressure into that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I gotta say, like within like religion, I don't think so. My family grew up mostly like Catholic. Whenever I was going through, I think through like middle school and then high school, we transitioned to Christianity. So things were a little bit different. But for a while there, I did believe that I was gonna wait till marriage, like before college and stuff. and then things kind of like perspectives and like curiosity started to just kind of dull in me and just kind of think more of that. It started to be like having these weird conversations, not weird conversations, but like difficult conversations with my mom, where we talk more about that and how she's like, no, you're wrong. And there's such like resistance with like, I guess with our parents, because they're somewhat like more traditional than us, where they're like, no, this is the right way, you have to do it the right way, not the wrong way, because then you're going to be shunned from the family, or you're going to be the black sheep from the family, and that's not always a fun place to be.
You will be the cousin that your tias will be talking about, no seas como ella, or don't end up like that cousin. Which is sad to think about it. Like, it shouldn't be like
shunning. There shouldn't be any shame and all that.
Exactly. Like, I feel like everybody has, which I feel like everyone should have their own way. Like, you know, I mean, if you know, life happens. Maybe you have your journey of like having kids first and then getting married, or getting married and then have kids. I honestly, like, I personally want to be married and then have kids, just to enjoy my marriage before I have children. But I also don't have like a negative view of like, okay, people who do because way. I mean, whatever happens, you know, but it is definitely like a very hard conversation to have with parents, just because, at least in my view, like, my parents got married first and then they had me because I'm the oldest. But so they have this of like, oh, our children are gonna follow the same steps. I agree. I mean,
even with like religion, I think mommy definitely sometimes tried to like put religion like put it all up in our face and stuff, and it was met with like, I don't want to do this anymore, kind of like resistance from us. But I think like with the years going by and stuff, I swayed away from just like religion, and that was a hard conversation with my mom too. And I had to kind of like sprinkle it in here and there, like, I don't know, I have these questions. And I think the way to kind of have these conversations with them is to sprinkle them in, not have like a thorough like sit down and talk about it. It's like just I don't know, just that's how I did it with my mom, unintentionally. This wasn't something that I planned to do. It's just kind of happened where we would be driving, and then she would ask like, are you going to church, are you doing these things? I was like, no, but I have been reading a lot about this. I have been looking into this of like spirituality and just like energy and earth and stuff like that, and becoming a lot more spiritual. Now we're able to have those like deep conversations about ideas and beliefs that we have and compare them, and it's like really like mentally stimulating and stuff. So,
and one thing about that you're talking about and connected to sex and everything, I feel like parents don't really give us the sex talk. Like, you know, it's those kind of those things of, I'm pregnant, and then they're like, ¿y por qué? Like,
go ahead.
I'm like, because you never gave me the sex talk.
I remember. I specifically remember the sex talk for me was like, you're gonna want to do things, don't do them, wait until marriage. Pero si algún día te embarazas y me sales con tu domingo 7, ya no vas a vivir aquí. And so I think for the longest time I was so scared of just like getting pregnant. Like, I joke about it even now, where I'm like, I think if I were to get pregnant now, I'd be scared to tell my mom.
Dude, that's how I feel. Like, I'm 28 years old, and
like,
I'm still having that like little back of my head. I'm like, if I do get pregnant now, like, what is my family gonna think? Está quedó embarazada. Like, no, my family's probably thinking, no, this girl needs to get pregnant because she's already getting old.
I'm like, what are you gonna do? I don't know.
Because I think it is so true. I think I still have that talk in the back of my head of like, no puedes salir embarazada, because
it's like very fear-based. It's not explorative. It's not like, it's very much like, if you mess up, these are the consequences, and you're not gonna have any support.
Exactly.
However, I do know that if I would have gotten pregnant when I was like younger, I would have definitely gotten support from my parents.
That's the thing with our Latino parents, like our Hispanic community, is que they always say, no te voy a ayudar, te vas a ir de la casa. But when the baby comes, no, you can stay. The baby can stay. Ay, mi nieto, mi nieta.
Yeah.
Like, they put that fear on us.
Yeah. Not all parents though, because like those super strict ones, and my heart goes out to all those like girls that definitely got shunned from their family and stuff.
That is so true.
Because, girl, my heart goes out to you.
Definitely, and I hope that whoever you are and wherever you're at right now, hopefully you're getting the support that you need, whether
on your own terms too.
Yeah, with your parents or without your parents, whoever it is, because it's hard, like, you know, just raising a child, whether, you know, with a partner or not, like, it's just hard in general. And it's those kinds of conversations that parents don't have with us, and it's so hard for us to have with them. Yeah, like, it's not like us sitting, oh, so what about kids, mom and dad? Like, what about sex? Like, it's this kind of conversation.
Like, you're not able to just bring that to the dinner table. Like, that's something that you have to go hide in a closet with someone else, like with your cousin, and kind of talk about it, because
exactly.
Not that I did that. Anyways, so yeah, I agree. Those conversations are hard. One thing though, like, yo siempre he sido bien noviera. Like, I've always liked to have boyfriends. You know, attachment style shit, you know. Anyways, with like dating, I was always told, espera hasta que tengas 15 años. Pero no, la niña quiso tener novio en el kinder.
This girl. Su novio del kinder, de la primaria.
Yeah, my kinder best friend took him from me, and she was like, don't talk to him because he got me mad today. But anyways, I don't remember their names, or else I would give them a shout out. But yeah, my parents would always be like, you can't have a boyfriend till you're 15. And then whenever I turned 15 and I was like, okay, I've had boyfriends, my mom made me choose between, like, you can have a quinceañera or you can have a boyfriend, because, like, technically
that's how it was for me too.
And I ended up choosing the boyfriend.
Hey,
ask me if I'm with him still.
No. Pero tú? Oh, is that the one you're married? No. No, but I feel like at that time we have that mentality of like, I want to, like, you know, have the boyfriend and everything because maybe your friends are doing it. Yeah, like, you know, or you just want to try it out, or you want to, like, you're curious about it, because who isn't at 15? Yeah.
And also, like, having the conversations with them of like, well, why does my brother get to go hang out with his girlfriend?
Well, because you have an older brother, right?
Yeah, so. But he's like a year older. Like, there's not much of a difference there. But it was always like
él puede hacer todo y tú no.
¿Y por qué él es hombre? Yeah. But that's another conversation for another day, because I can go off on that topic.
Well, I can't relate because I'm the oldest, but one thing that she did say that I could relate a lot was the quinceañera. I, like, growing up, my family, my mom was mostly the one that was like, you can't dance with other guys until you turn 15, or not, you're not gonna have a quinceañera. You can't have a boyfriend until you're 15 because you're not gonna have a quinceañera. And my biggest dream was to have a quinceañera.
I thought you were gonna say to have a boyfriend.
No, that was your biggest dream, girl. That was your biggest dream. My biggest dream was to, you know, it was to just have a quinceañera, and I was just like, yep, serving all of these. I will go to the dance, to the bailes in Mexico. I'm like, no. And then, like, joking, my family has
always... You're so proper, eat it.
Yeah, my family has always been they have always been big teasers. And then they will be like, la Eddie andaba bailando en el baile, ya no le van a hacer quinceañera. Ya no le van a hacer quinceañera. Like, no, I wasn't. I was dancing with my cousin. Era mi primo.
I bet Tote was always trying to get a chance to dance with you.
No, I actually met him when I turned 15. So, no, he's lying, because I met him when I was 15. So I was dancing already. Ya lo que dicen, I was a bailadora. Ya era una bailadora.
You were the one being like, y'all wouldn't dance with me?
No, he asked me. And my tias have this thing of like, when you're 15, you have to dance with everybody who asks you to dance.
Oh, damn.
Because now you're like a whole, like,
Señora.
No, señorita, que ya estás para el público for everyone to like.
So cringe.
To like meet the boyfriend because now you can date, right? Yeah. So when I met Tote was at 15. But that's a whole nother story.
Did you live in a Mexican Bridgerton era or something?
Pretty much. I think so. I think Mantequilla, like that's the name of my mom's rancho, was a little Bridgerton. Not thinking about it.
Well, wait, Mantequillaton.
Mantequillaton. Not thinking about it. I think so. I mean...
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I mean, we can start talking about... That's a whole other story about dating. Yeah. But yeah, like the whole vibe of like, you can't marry my daughter because you're poor. Or you can't marry my son because you don't come from a good family, and we are.
Yeah. Damn. Okay, well, we're gonna have to... Well, we can name that the episode name, Mantequillaton.
Mantequillaton?
Or Bridgerton-ish.
No, I like Mantequillaton.
Okay.
I like Mantequillaton.
Okay, where were we? College.
Oh, that was another one.
Having that conversation with them, yeah.
So one of our response from our question was that it was a very hard conversation to have with parents, was telling them that they're gonna move out and go to college away from home. And I can see that. I mean, I went to San Marcos, which is only 45 minutes away from Austin, and my mom was like crying her eyes out. So imagine having that same conversation with someone that went to another state or maybe another country too, like people who study abroad and stuff. True.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think, like, traditionally, los Latinos, like, you stay home until you get married.
That is true.
You literally, like, you stay home until you get married, and coming into a different country where, like, it's more traditional in this country to like leave home at 18. Like, that is a time. So it's really hard to kind of stay away from that, or stray away from that idea that, you know, I do have to move somewhere to gain some independence, because within the Latino community or Hispanos, like, we are very family focused. We, like I said, we stay home until we get married, and we help out the family, or usually take on the jobs that they have.
And I think another thing with that is, like, if you go up to your parents and be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm moving away for college, like somewhere far, is your way of like, fallé como papá, because you're moving away. Like you said, they're moving away before they are married.
Yeah. So or like, they hate this.
Yeah, they don't like this environment, and I can see a lot of parents maybe thinking that way too. I mean, it wasn't my experience, but I think so. Like, even, I don't know, like, you moved a little bit more further than I did, but how was yours?
Mine, I think at that point I was very much trying to flee from home. And that kind of just has to do more with, like, my dynamics with my own family. But I think I was needing some space and some, like, a lot of growing up to do, because I think that if I would have grown up there, I would have been completely different.
Do you feel like if you would have stayed there, you would have been more traditional than you are right now?
I think against I don't know that I would be...
Maybe not very traditional.
I think I would not necessarily be enforced to, but I think I would have fallen into that of like, maybe like getting married sooner, having children sooner, maybe having different ideas and moralities. So I definitely think that, like, staying there, I could be a lot more different. But I don't know that I would have enjoyed that, because I've always been very rebellious against traditional values and norms. And I've always wanted to make my own way in life. And I have that kind of, like, spirit in me. So I don't know that I would have been as happy as I am here.
And I feel like, that's the thing, like, we're very different. Like, I feel like rules for me were made for me to follow, and I feel like for Yesi, rules were made for her to break. Like, you know, it's that difference.
I think, like, when it comes to home stuff, yes, But I mean, I've always been a like follow the rules kind of girl, like in school.
Oh yeah.
And like other places, but I think at home I did fight against those ideas and beliefs that they would set on me. But yeah, I agree.
And I think in that case, for like moving away for college, from my experience, I can see why it was so hard for my mom. Was just that, I mean, I think about it two things. I feel like first is it was hard for her because I'm the oldest, just kind of like, oh, the one who's helping me and do all of these things, my responsible, my the one that is my kind of like, the one doing everything for me is moving away. What am I gonna do now? Mm-hmm. Or like, she was so comfortable or used to me constantly like doing stuff for her or like helping her out.
Stepping up in those different ways.
So I feel like maybe that was her reason of like, you know, her being like, oh, why do you have to move away? Mm-hmm. Why don't you just go to school here?
Yeah.
Or maybe like her other part could be like, or maybe a little bit of both, of her way of saying, oh, my child is growing up and I don't want her to grow up and I want her to stay here forever. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was a little bit of both. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could ask her that because I feel like that would be a really good conversation to have with the parent. Like, why were you so scared of me moving out?
Yeah.
Like, why was it so hard for you to let go?
That is a good question.
And I feel like even for us, at least for myself, I mean, I think it would have been hard for me to tell her, hey, mom, I'm moving out of state, would be because in the back of my mind, I would have been like, oh my God, like I'm moving away from my mom. Like I mean, there's not going to be nobody there to help her out.
I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary to do all by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that conversation. I was very scared to talk about this with my mom. Because I think like slowly I was like, okay, I'll go to UTV, which was, it's now UTRGV. But I was like, I'll go to the college nearby us. It's only like 30 minutes away. And then I was like, no, I'll go to Corpus Christi. And then slowly it kind of became this thing of like, no, I have more opportunity to go in other places farther away. And when I made a decision, I was like, I think I'm going to leave. It was hard for me to tell her because I think no matter like how our relationship was back then, it's still hard to go away from somewhere that you feel so comfortable in. And that was hard for me to do. And she was also like very emotional. Like the times, I believe like the first few years she would cry when she came to drop me off. But I think it had more to do with like she was gonna miss me. And I even like wonder now, like was it a thing of like what like I'm trying to like think of, like put myself in her shoes and try to like think of like how she perceived it. Like was it that she thought that I was running away from home, or was it that I was like running away from her or something, you know? So now I think about that, but I don't know, who's to say. But it was a very difficult conversation because those expectations, like you don't want to, that you're so responsible for so much at such a young age. Like in Cynthia's episode, she mentions like having to read very important documents for your parents and doing all those things, and I was more open to doing those things than my brother, I feel like. So some of that kind of fell on me, or at least I felt that way.
And I feel like that you have those people who are afraid to have the conversation of moving away, and they end up moving away. But then you have those people, like those first gens or anyone in general, who avoid having the conversation, so they just end up not moving away because they're having doubts of like, no, because if I move, I have to stay, like I have to stay and like help out, I have to do this,
that responsibility of them.
And it sucks that like we are so afraid to have these conversations, because you never know, like what if you would have had this conversation with your parents and they would have been like, see, mijo, mija, like go ahead, like go for it. But in the back of your mind you were so scared to have it because you're like, no, what if they don't want me to?
Yeah.
And I feel like, at least that's the thing for me, I've been a big doubtful person. I've been so like hard, like when it comes to I've been a very indecisive person, for the same reason of like the what ifs, like what if no, what if they're not okay with it, or like what if it's not right. And I feel like this question of wanting to move away whether you go to college or not, just in general, is just very hard. And I feel like a lot of people want to go ahead and do this big step, and they don't end up doing it because
of that fear of like what
fear.
their parents might think.
Yeah. So if you're out there wanting to move away, have this conversation with your parents.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of what's gonna happen, and whether the result is, work it out. Like, maybe, hey, I can come and visit every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on where you're moving, obviously. Coming with an agreement, because you also have to live your life.
You have to learn to be your own person.
Exactly. And if you're gonna stay behind because of this person or that person,
like if you stay home, stay because you want to stay, not because you feel this sense of responsibility to stay. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with like the traumas that we experience, like growing up with them. Because to a certain extent, not to say that everyone who grows up with this mentality is, has gone through trauma, but it is traumatic, or it does leave a big imprint on you to grow up with these expectations. Like, even as a child, like, I am responsible for reading this paperwork that's really important for my parents and to get it right every time. Like, that is a big that's a big responsibility to have. And like growing up with that sense of responsibility for your parents, which they are the ones who have to take care of you. But I think that in our community and within our traditions, like, it is something that is celebrated. Like, oh, tus hijos te cuidan muy bien, which, yes, we take care of our family. But to feel like we have to base all of our decisions based off that extended family is a lot of pressure. And that within and of itself can be traumatic.
Exactly. And then that kind of an idea, I don't know, who knows, maybe you grew up like that, now you're a parent of your own, and now you're expecting your children to have the same mentality. Oh, bitch.
The conversations that I've had with some family members about that is, ooh.
It's those kinds of, like, when I read this response about having a difficult conversation, it's all about trauma, like, it's kind of the
traumas they have caused you.
Yeah, like, you can go up to your parent like, because of you I'm like this. Because they're gonna be like, well, I'm sorry I didn't raise you good enough, or like,
because go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna be like, well, why don't you just, I can already hear the parents saying, o es que no tenía lo suficiente, hice lo que pude, or like stuff like that.
Yes, because in sharing that trauma is essentially saying, like, the way that you parented me was not okay. Which, yes, it is, but it's not like parents get very defensive. Because, like, inclusivamente con mi familia, and because I'm a therapist, and because I see a therapist, and I've done a lot of like healing of myself, of like my inner child and all that, I have come to realize a lot of the things that I experienced growing up were maybe things that I didn't need to experience. And that has been itself like a very difficult conversation to have with my mom, because every time that I do bring it up or that we do talk about it, she's like, but I was here. Your dad wasn't here all the time, but I was here. So how are you affected by me, And I think that it's really hard for her to hear, because she's always thought herself as like, I am the parent that has done the most for you. But essentially, like, this just being there does not protect us from the emotional harm that sometimes we have carried on.
I think the parent becomes a defensive parent, where they're like, I did the most that I could. You're like, I'm not saying that you didn't. I'm just saying that because of what you did, I feel like, and it comes to this idea of like, so estás like, no estás apreciando lo que hice. That's what I'm saying, like, this defensive parent. I'm like, you're reading everything so wrong. Like, I'm not saying that
you're not a great parent.
I'm just saying that what I lived growing up has made me this way. Like, I appreciate everything you did, but
it has still affected me to some extent.
And it's those kinds of things of like, if you don't talk about it, then it's going to continue happening over and over again.
Oh, back to that conversation of boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah, but talking to your parents about trauma that they have not necessarily caused you, but the results of how they were as a parent, it's not, maybe not because they intended to, it's just a result of what they know.
And I sometimes feel for my parents sometimes, like, you know, in a way of like whenever they tell me stories of growing up, I am very grateful for what they gave me and what, like, you know, who I am today, because I mean they taught me a lot, and I feel like they gave me what they could with what they had, and I feel like sometimes it's those kind of trauma that happens because with intentionally, like, and then it's not like the intention for them to cause us trauma, like, oh, you're gonna have trauma like all your life. No, it's because of resources, and it's like stuff that happens when, like, you know, when life happens. Yeah,
or they learn this from their parents. And I do gotta say, like, I do think that every generation encompasses some sort of trauma, and they change depending on like what route they take. They change a certain aspect of that and evolve to make a better living situation for their offsprings. But there's still some things that aren't able to be resolved within that generation, you know? For example, we can have a parent who is not very emotionally available or doesn't have a lot of income and is very poor, and then the next generation comes and they work a lot to be able to provide for, you know, for the family and give them what they didn't have as a child, you know, thinking of that money wise. But then the next generation comes in and they're like, well, you weren't there for me, you were working all the time, where is my emotional availability, when they were just trying to get the basic needs met. So I think to some extent, like, each generation does evolve and get better, but we still remain with some trauma that hasn't been resolved.
Exactly. And now that you think about, like, you're talking about this, I remember like being in like elementary school, middle school, mostly elementary school and middle school, whenever I was like in extracurricular activities in school. My parents used to work full time. Like, my dad used to work in construction all my life, and my mom used to be she used to work in a cleaners, so she used to work like all these early hours, long hours, and my dad the same thing. So I used to do all these extracurriculars, and they never showed up. They never used to go to my games. They never used to do anything. And then in my, like, growing up, I'm like, oh, no les importaba.
Yeah, it's a whole different,
like, no les importaba. So like me growing up, like, no, I don't want to be the parent because that mattered for me, and it, like, showing up matters kind of thing, you know. And it's kind of like my parents, obviously intentionally, they wanted to be there, they wanted to be present, but
they weren't able to. Yeah.
And it's those kinds of like traumas that, like, you're talking about, that develop every.
And if you're trying to have a conversation about the traumas that your parents have, you know, caused you to some extent, like, it is going to take a while to set in, because parents are going to be defensive.
Exactly.
Parents are going to have to sit down and really think about this and sit with their emotions of like, damn, like, you know, I tried my bestest. Because essentially you're I think they seem to see it as like a way of like, you're criticizing me.
Exactly.
Me estás criticando en la forma en que yo te di todo. And essentially saying like it wasn't good enough kind of thing, but it just didn't meet some of your other needs.
Exactly.
But it is always a difficult conversation. If you are trying to have that conversation, it can always be mediated, family therapy, or even just like sprinkle it in several different occasions, because it is a very, very difficult. I think this is the most difficult conversation to have with a parent.
I think so too, and I think it's just because there's so much behind it. Like, it's gonna bring up topics that are not even in the question or in the conversation.
And I think about like even dynamics within my grandparents and my parents, and I'm like, why don't you talk to them about this? And they're like, no, this is just who they are. And I'm like, oh hell no.
I see so, and I'm like, are they?
That doesn't excuse their behavior. Excuse me, ma'am. We are breaking generational curses in this family.
Exactly.
But yeah. that one is a toughie. But on a lighter note, alcohol. How did you have that conversation with your parents? I don't know that you guys had a conversation.
I think it's so funny how we just emerged from trauma. Now I have an alcohol problem because of the trauma I had growing up. I'm just kidding, guys. No, but I feel like that's a conversation that you don't have with parents. And then, at least I didn't. Like, at least in my family are like men, especially more men, they start drinking at like 13, 14.
Yeah.
Don't call CPS on those guys or anyone. That's just
parents are involved, so it's technically legal.
And then for us, like, at least, I mean, my family was a bit different because we, like, I know I have always said that we're very traditional, but there's certain things that we're not very traditional about. Like, example, women drinking. I feel like there's those families that are like, esa mujer está tomando, like, why is she drinking?
Yeah. O que se ponga súper borracha,
yeah,
y
like,
que
qué vergüenza.
Tirada and stuff.
My family, we don't care. Like, we have always been like, men and women drink, and that's it. Like, but there's those families that are like, you're a woman, you're not allowed to drink.
Yeah, I think for my family, I don't know that there was ever a talk of like, okay, you can drink now.
Same.
You know, I think like whenever we did have like parties and stuff, my mom would be like, okay, toma un trago si quieres, and then just leave it at that. And then like slowly, I think my mom accepted more of me drinking when I moved. Mm-hmm. Like when I moved out of home, that's when I was like, things were a little bit better within that. But there is always, like I told you, this talk of like, well, te tienes que portar bien, no quiero que andes de ridícula, no seas sinvergüenza, no tomes tanto, cuídate, no dejes tus bebidas solas, si vas al baño, llévate tu bebida contigo, pero tampoco no te hagas de ridícula. You know, like, don't do all shit you did in college.
Exactly. And I feel like there you have those people, at least in my way of viewing it, I enjoy drinking with my family. Like, I enjoy showing up who I am to my family instead of hiding it. Like, I'm not gonna be like drinking behind them and then in front of my family. Ay, yo no tomo, I'm a saint, soy una santa, yo no tomo. I like, no, BS.
But if you do that, like, still listen to us.
Still, no judgment in that. I mean, here. Just be true to yourself, to be honest. Like, I feel like if your parents don't let you drink, maybe you should have that conversation. Be like, ¿por qué no? Why not?
But also, like, don't be 18 still living with them and then having that conversation, because I think that's another different.
Yeah. But I feel like with alcohol, it also merges with puberty. Like, they're like in the way of like, oh, ya eres una señorita, ya eres un...
Puedes tomar poquito.
Puedes tomar poquito. I feel like that's how it started with my family.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're 15? Okay, you can have like a little bit. And no más poquito.
Yeah.
Put more squirt than whatever you're pouring.
Than the actual liquor. Yeah. I think, like, in terms of like alcohol and I guess like puberty, yes. But like just like the awkward conversations of like your body changing and stuff was very different for me. I don't know. Was it different?
In what way?
I don't know.
It was different, but I just don't know how.
Was it different? I honestly don't really remember. I just remember waking up one day and like having my period and like knowing I was gonna get my period soon. But I didn't know how it's gonna affect me as much, like, you know, in terms of cramps and stuff. But I don't know if there was this big like difficult conversation with them to have, because it wasn't really much like shamed in my family. It was something that we knew happened and we didn't talk to others about as much.
It's the same thing with alcohol.
Ah, yes.
It's the same thing with alcohol. Like, I don't know where you're.
Ya eres un puberto.
Yeah.
Eres un puberto. Hando, eres un puberto.
Like, you hit puberty. Yay. Okay. Like.
Yeah.
They don't really tell you. It's the same thing with alcohol. They don't really tell you, like.
It's just something that happens, yeah. It's a part of.
Life happens.
It's just when growing up.
And I feel like that's another hard, like. thing to like hard conversation to have with parents, because I remember whenever I started drinking, I never used to like sit down with my parents and like, okay, so what can I drink, or qué no puedo tomar, or qué sí puedo tomar, or cuánto, or like what happens after I drink. Oh, I get a cruda, like a hangover, like what do I do to cure it? Like it's the same thing with puberty, like, oh, I have my period, or I have pubic hair now, or like stuff like that.
Hey mom.
Like it's not like those kind of conversations that you're just like sit down and be like, so what do I do now? Like at least for my case, like I remember whenever I had my period, like my mom didn't tell me my options. She was just like, here is a pad, you said.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were such things as other options like tampons, the cup, or anything like that. I didn't know there was more to it. All I grew up knowing was just like, oh, there's pads.
Yeah, or just like even like the big, not rumors, like the big ideas around like puberty and stuff of like how like your mood changes and how it affects people around you and stuff. I don't know. I feel like puberty really freaked me out right now. I don't know.
It's a very dark time of my life. But
I feel uncomfortable suddenly.
That's what purity is, guys. Yeah. It makes you feel uncomfortable.
It makes you feel uncomfortable.
You're in the middle of, am I a child or am I an adult?
Yeah.
Neither of those.
Yeah. Well, that's what they kind of said on you. Like, ya eres una señorita, te tienes que portar como una señorita.
But then yet again, if you want to do something, you're like, no, todavía no tienes la edad.
Yeah. So it's just very weird, like, I don't know.
But I feel like that's how conversations with parents are. I don't know. They're very hard, very awkward, very unexpected, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you can have these conversations, but they just happen without being planned.
Yeah. I agree. But I think it's smart to kind of prepare when things do come out or do come up. Like, because obviously you don't want to have a conversation when alcohol is involved.
Exactly.
But you also don't want to come like prepared to just destroy every relationship you have in your family. But being patient, I think, with our traditional parents sometimes can come in handy.
Be mindful.
Yeah, be mindful that it takes some time. Like, they have this perspective of you, and although you may not live in that perspective, it's a part of their child that they might grieve. Mm-hmm. In a sense, like waiting for you to have sex until you get married. Like, there's a part that they're gonna be like, oh, but I really wanted you to do this, and so that expectation has been kind of canceled out, and they're grieving that. So giving them some of that grace.
You know, I talked to Veronica about this, about grieving.
Shout out, Veronica.
Yeah, about grieving the person who you were. And I feel like that's how parents are. Mm-hmm. Like, whenever you have these conversations, or whenever something happens, like getting pregnant without being married, or moving out to college, like moving away from college, it's not that they're crying because they're disappointed of you. I feel like they're crying the person that you were
in their mind.
Yeah, or they're crying because now you're not, like, you know, their baby anymore. Yeah. Now you're a person who's about to have a baby of their own, or an adult about to move on to make a life of their own. Like, you know, all of these things. And I like to think about it that way. I like to think about them not crying that they're disappointed, or them, like, you know, giving you their back or anything. Yeah. It's not that they're disappointed. I just feel like you said, they're grieving the person that you were before this big step.
Well, it's also easier to like be angry than be hurt.
Exactly.
So I know, especially in our like Latino community, like, it's a lot easier to be angry, to show anger, instead of crying and feeling hurt and admitting like that hurts. Mm-hmm. So that's why parents can, or just in general anyone, can become defensive and angry about something or feedback that you might have for them. Mm-hmm. So just try to think about like what other emotions they might be feeling as well. And it's not your responsibility to make them feel better. It's not. It's on them. It's on them to be able to cope with what's going on, and for them to accept you. It's just give them that grace. Give them that time. Maybe don't talk to them for a couple of weeks, or maybe don't have those deep conversations for a while until you feel like enough time has passed that they have been able to deal with it to some extent, and then reopen that. Because if you go too hard too soon, things can get wild.
And yeah, I like how you said give them time, because I feel like not only are you giving them time, but you're giving yourself time to kind of like put your thoughts together on like, whatever I'm gonna say, is it okay to say it, or am I gonna be too hard on them? Because we don't want to say something that we're later gonna regret.
Yeah, like we don't want to be rude when we have these conversations with them. We just want to be civil and get the point across. Like, go back to our boundaries, episode, and like really think about what is the message that I'm trying to be clear about, and how am I gonna say it to the extent that I'm not intentionally hurting them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, this was such a great topic. I just feel like
it was a good one.
I just feel like I want to go back to being 18, 19 and having conversations with my parents.
I don't know about that.
I feel like I'm ready.
Okay, well, while you go back in time, I will wait for you over here.
I'm just kidding. Well, we hope you guys like this episode. Send us your feedback. Keep in touch with us.
Yeah.
Stay in our socials.
Yeah, if you guys do try to have difficult conversations with your parents, or just with anyone in general, email us. Tell us how it went. Except if it didn't go great, then don't email us. I'm just kidding.
No, still email us. We want to hear everything. We'll be here to support, and we want to thank you for joining us on this new episode, and hope you guys like it and enjoy it, and can't wait to share another one.
Subscribe.
Share. Y acuérdense,
aquí sí lloramos.